Hello and welcome. My name is Victor and you're watching the Nordic Takedown. We are making a deck tech video with the Danish dynamic duo of deck construction. With me is Steven, good friend of the podcast. Welcome back again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Always great to have you on, man. And also, by this time, quite a common guest on our things, Jonas, and the champ of Europe and everything.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
It's so great to be here with you. When I was watching the stream from Lille the other weekend, I was so excited because you guys brought my baby, Sabine, to this. But then I realized this was no ordinary Sabine. I wasn't expecting you guys to be bringing something like Sabine because you're famous for playing more control-y stuff. Jonas, you've been on Palpatine. That's the opposite. and most famously, you've been on Cad Blue and going down the villain control route. What made you put your eyes? Where do you go with Sabine?
As you mentioned, we've been playing a lot of Cat Bane Blue in the past, but with the release of Jump to Lightspeed, the game has just gotten super, super fast, right? So we had been testing quite a bit, also playing in Milan, and Cat Bane just gets destroyed by all these discard decks, especially Quinlan. It can be very difficult to keep up. So I was thinking a bit about it, like, what can you do, really? You want an aggressive deck, but I also like the comfort of having a lot of health and playing the long game still. So I looked at Data Vault and I was like, that 33 is quite a good number. And I was wondering, like, can you pair it with one of the more aggressive leaders? So I was between Sabine and Han, young Han at first, because those are two of the more popular early leaders in the aggression color. Because I wanted to get all of these traditional cards from the Sabine list and just keep pushing damage to base while still sitting leaned back and just having a good time, right? Sitting comfortably with so much health. But I ended up going with Sabine because she deploys one turn earlier. She can ping once every turn and just keep up the pressure, which can make it very, very stressful for your opponent to keep up.
So you're kind of touching on one of the interesting points, because when you look at the list, it looks a lot like what you would expect maybe a Han 2 deck to look like if you were constructing a Han 2 Data Vault. What are the drawbacks of playing Han 2? Because I think it doesn't really add up maybe for everyone.
The difference between Han and Sabine is what the leader provides for the deck. First off, Sabine deploys on 4 and Han deploys on 5. And they both do the same amount of damage. So in the race, Sabine is just 3 damage ahead from the get-go. And into the longer matchups, Sabine gives you actual value turn over turn by doing 1 damage to your opponent's base, whereas Han just makes the cards that you're already playing a little faster. So in the long game, Sabine can use the action to force your opponent to either kill you or they will die. Like, someone is going to die, so that you can't ever really be fully controlled out of the game because you will always be able to do damage. And then the action stalling is also something you can abuse with Sabine, which is a bit harder with the Han leader.
So it's the ping. It's always the ping.
It's the ping.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, let's look at those cards then, because when we here's the list. This is the list, and when you look at it, a lot of it is just what you would expect from Sabine. What is it about these staples of Sabine that attracts you?
We play a lot of standard cards in this deck. For example, Cashion just as a 3/5 on 5 with utility in the late game. And stuff like Rebel Assault. Rebel Assault was very important to us in the deck because you needed to race some of the faster decks. The whole point of having Rebel Assault in the deck is that most of the early drops are still Rebels in the deck. You don't get outside of the Rebel faction until you pay more for your units. and your leader is also a rebel. So on 5 resources, when you want to play 2 cards, you will most likely have 2 rebels to play. And then a card like Timely Intervention, since you don't have Energy Conversion Lab, you need to have the pressure on the control decks in the late game. You need to be able to cheat, and since you can smuggle it out, it's very free. We also play Blue Leader. The point of Blue Leader is that it was very strong into the other heroic decks, both the red heroic decks and the blue heroic decks, because a lot of their space units do not have 3 attacks. You can eat them with the ambush. And then in the later game, you can eat a lot of the blue heroic units like Yoda and Kanan on the ground with the ambush from the Blue Leader and the XP.
Yeah, it's very versatile in that, like that.
Yeah. I've used it a lot as a 5-drop during the tournament. And then we included Sundari Peacekeeper because we needed it to race against the space decks. There's a lot of decks in the current meta that will ignore the ground arena, like the Han pilot stuff. And the best way to race that is to play a 5-5 on turn 2 of the game. I say 5-5 because he swings for 3 and then restores 2, so you're essentially you're racing for 5 when you swing with the card.
Moving on to some maybe not as usual cards anymore. All of these cards have been at some points quite common in Sabine lists, but they have somewhat fallen off, I think. But you picked them up and included them. Let's go through why are these cards back on the menu for you guys?
I guess I'll start talking about Fighters for Freedom. I think I was kind of pushing Fighters for Freedom a little bit. We needed more 3-cost cards to fill out our curve of 2 into 3 into 2 2s. And this card just has a lot of utility. It was not very playable with Django because ping Tarkin Town, you would be too far behind. But now the 4 HP, nothing really swings for 4 in the early turns of the game. So it will most likely stay alive, and it matches up very well into stuff like Village Protectors. And if you look at the deck list, a lot of the 2-drops are red. So many times during the tournament, I would play Fighters for Freedom and then get 2 pings out of my Fighters for Freedom on the flip turn, and it's just a lot of damage. Again, just an annoying unit with upside that can make it awkward for your opponent to play. I have Timely Intervention as the Fighters for Freedom into a Village Protector with 2 shields. So it's just a 3-drop with upside.
That's the kind of thing that makes you smile, huh?
Yeah, it was a good time. Adelphi is our Fleet Lieutenant. It kind of does the same thing, but not really. But the upside with Adelphi is, of course, that you can do it to any unit. But the text on Adelphi is, like the +2 text on Adelphi isn't always that relevant. In some of these games, it's very important to get the initiative back in the later turns. So sometimes you just play Adelphi, attack with your unit, and then they will have actions left. So either Adelphi gains you some amount of life, or you get the initiative on the next turn, and you have developed a relatively large space unit. A lot of decks are not capable of handling a 4/6 space unit very efficiently, especially if they have already used their resources on the 5-resource turn. Then they will have to play some card that probably won't use all their resources to deal with the Adelphi. And because we're playing Sabine, we do so much damage that the 4 will kill them.
And for Quetzonio, we needed to fill out the 2-drop area of the deck to stick up with the 60 cards, of course. And we've seen Quetzal before in some of the set 2 and maybe even some of the set 3 Sabine decks. She hits for 3, which is super strong. It's very relevant in case you play the Mirror and your opponent plays a Battlefield Marine, then you're just a bit screwed if you have Sabine or something with only 2 power, right? So she trades very well with some of the other 2-drops. She has Saboteur, so she also kills the Crafty Sparklers and the lead. And then she has this interesting text that if you attack the base, you're allowed to defeat an upgrade that costs 2 or less. So if you have the initiative, you play Ketsu, and maybe a Quinlan will play a Crafty Smuggler. You can hit the base and take the shield, and they might be forced to still trade in. So you get 3 to the base, but you still get the trade into the unit.
She costs 2. She's a red unit. She's heroic. She attacks for 3. She has upside.
Okay. It's that simple.
We also did some testing into the different boss decks, both green and blue. And if you have her turn 1 with the initiative, it's more or less just game over for the boss, right? Because they cannot play any of their bounties, because you'll just remove them, and then they've wasted both a turn and a card.
And just the most annoying heroic red 2-drop you can find. It's very important to swing for 3. Again, you can't play units that don't swing for 3, because they will just get eaten by a lot of things, like their battlefield marine and stuff like this. Also, if someone ambushes into you with their 3/5 on turn 2 to get the tempo back, then you have 3 damage on their unit. It has 2 left, so that's perfect for your red 5. Stuff like this. But yeah.
So these cards are all things that are familiar to the Sabine player, but you're also playing some cards that are certainly newer inclusions that you wouldn't normally see in Sabine lists. Red 5 and Senatorial Corvette, right?
Yeah, Senatorial Corvette. The red 5 is just super strong. We've seen the stat line 3/4 for 3 fall a bit off on the ground because of all these 3/5 getting released, right? But it's the first time we're really seeing the bomb in space. So as Jonas said, for Ketsu, it's heroic, it's red. This one is also rebel. It's a 3/4 in space for 3, and it just has this amazing text. When you attack, you may deal 2 damage to a damaged unit, and it's good for during the trades if you want to clean up an ambush, or if you just need to also clean up some damaged units in general. We saw Jonas do this in the final, actually, that I was very excited to see against the Anakin player, where Anakin had just played a Poe Dameron on the board, and Jonas had a blue leader in hand, so he would play it and ambush into the Poe for 5, and then swing 3 to the base with red 5 after to kill off, and then just doing the 1-for-1 trade, more or less, while still pushing damage to the base. And we also saw that in the mirrors, both the Datavold mirror and also with the ECL mirror. It's just incredible to clean up units and deal with the board.
It's it's the most punishing follow-up to your opponent and using their energy conversion lab to kill your 2-drop once they kind of figure out that is one of the lines that they might be forced into taking to race you, right?
It kind of trades while hitting the base, like you say. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is brutal. It's really strong cards.
Yeah.
Again, because we are faster, or we're faster because we have more life. So a lot of the time, your opponent has to trade into you, but if their units trade into our units, and then we kill their units with red 5, if a red 5 does 4-6 damage during a game, it is impossible to come back from that value proposition.
And then we've got Senatorial Corvette, which I don't think you see a lot of play with outside of your list. We're getting into the more interesting cards here.
So Senatorial Corvette is a card that I've been pushing for a very long time because I play Blue Villainy, and discarding a card gives me depression. But why in Sabine then? There is not enough strong high cost or mid cost ground units that you would want to play. So when you play a space unit, this thing has Saboteur, which gets around all of the stuff that people normally play to defend their space arena, like the Concord Dawn and the Bright Hope and the 2/4 in Yellow Villainy.
Jump Master, yeah,
the Jump Master. They can't even trade into Corvette. Like an Anakin using a Concord Dawn can't actually eat your Corvette. So what happens is that you explode on your flip turn. You have 3 or 4 units in play. They will usually use your resources to deal with your current board, and then you can play Corvette. they won't be able to deal with it this turn. And if they do it as their first action on the next turn, there are no like super efficient ways of dealing with this card. I mean, No Glory is okay. You're still wasting one resource, could be fine. But if you are like open firing or takedowning or Felder Dragoning a Corvette, you're 2-for-1ing yourself, and you might not even have dealt with the rest of the board.
Yeah.
I think that this card is undervalued in general. Like, if you have not like been a control player that doesn't actually draw cards, it is devastating to lose a card. Like, you need every card in your hand. The quality of your hand just goes down because these longer decks that want to go longer are forced to resource every turn, so they only draw one card. But I'm a Sabine player, so if I want to stop at 5, I can just stop at 5 and play 3 units.
Indeed.
The big part is the Saboteur and the 2-for-1. Like, just
the text is just a bonus against blue decks, basically.
Yeah. Space unit that hits hard and then has the best upside and ignores Sentinel, which is the most common counter in the space right now.
So moving on to something even more rare to see, Frisk. I actually played around with this a little bit in the beginning of the set when Poe was played a lot. What is the thought process behind this card?
I had 3 in hyperspace. Okay, that's not the only reason.
It's part of the reason.
That is one of the reasons. There are 3 different cards that you can play in this slot. We wanted 18 2-cost cards in the deck to consistently have a 2-cost on turn 1 and multiple 2-costs on turn 3. The only other 4-cost is K2, so most of the time you will be forced to play 2 2-costs to spend your resources efficiently. So it is about finding the 2-cost that you think has the most value for the 15th to 18th 2-cost. And we were between Luke Skywalker Pilot, Frisk, and the Jyn Erso unit. I think the Jyn Erso unit was the first one that we got discarded, and then Steven chose to play the Luke Skywalker, and I chose to play the Frisk. So why did I play Frisk? 2-cost, red, heroic, swings for 3, has upside. It's very the red thing is quite important when you have Fighters for Freedom. It's sort of like the whole deck just mashes together to create a little bit of extra value wherever you can get it to sort of reach the finish line before your opponent. It is very relevant that Frisk pilots for 2 rather than 3, like the Luke Skywalker unit, because you can attach him as a pilot on the flip turn and still play another unit. And even if you play him as a pilot, you will still ping with the Fighters of Freedom. So it has come up for me that I piloted him on the 4 resource turn while also playing another unit. But yeah, I mean, it's mostly just because it's a red 2-cost that swings for 3. Like, he has been deployed to the ground probably more than he has been deployed as a pilot.
Yeah.
But, I mean...
So the text is kind of irrelevant then?
I mean, no, it's just that it is the 2-cost that has the best text for me. I have defeated upgrades, right? Like if you look at the other lists that were floating around this hub, people are playing like Entrenched and like Shields. Like, I've defeated Shields, I've defeated XPs, I've defeated Entrenched during the weekend. So it has upside. It's just, but it is mostly just because it's a red 2-cost that's heroic.
Yeah, even though you cannot defeat the pilots, and even if people don't really play any like specific upgrades, you will always be able to find some experience tokens or some shields, and that can definitely like swing the matchup if necessary.
You could defeat the Luke pilot, and
you could.
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah.
You could also defeat Frisk with a Frisk.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
He's going to be good in the mirror. So yeah, as Jonas said, we were a bit torn between these 2. I was very much into Luke. I think he has a great text, obviously one of the most expensive rares, which shows that most people agree. He's a 3/2 for 2. He's very similar to Frisk in the ground arena. The difference being that Frisk is red, so he gets that extra ping from fighters. On the other hand, Luke is rebel, so you can choose him for rebel assault if necessary. So the big difference is the piloting. Luke pilots for 3 instead of 2. But when he gets defeated as the upgrade, you can move him to the ground arena. So Jonas is right that you cannot really do the same trick on the flip turn where you pilot Luke and play something else, because then you will have 1 resource left, which it is a bit awkward. However, in some matchups, especially some of the aggro mirrors and so on, if you have the initiative and you start with an A-wing and just slam Luke on the second turn and just keep hitting for 6, no matter if they deal with it or not, you will still have this recursion of getting Luke on the ground, and it's been working really great for me. I was considering Frisk, but we were talking a lot about like how much do we expect Bosk to be a thing, because that would be the main motivation for me to pick him over Luke. I didn't face a single one. I think for the matchups that I played in Lille, I preferred Luke. I had 2 Lukes and 1 Frisk actually, because sometimes I would. It happened quite often during testing. I don't really know why, but I would have 2 Lukes on 4 for some reason. So I was just like, and Jonas had a good point that the 1 Frisk would probably be better than the 3rd Luke, just to have some.
So you're not unique ruling yourself, so you can play
so
your
you
2
have some
cards with your
diversity
Sabine.
for the double drop on 4.
Since you're very much treating them as the same slot, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and you weren't interested, Jonas, in doing 2 Frisks and 1 Luke then.
I don't own any Lukes, and I have Frisk and Hyperspace, so...
all right.
Also, I mean, it was great for me. It was great against the Qi'ras. It was great against the Iden Yellow I played, so I have no complaints about Frisk.
Yep.
Red 2 cost that swings for 3. Thank you.
That's all she wrote. Well, I mean, as weird as this card might have been to most people's eyes, it's nothing compared to this card. Raddus. Come on, guys.
I honestly don't get why people are so surprised at it. I mean, like, have you seen this? Like, it's a 7 cost that hits for 8, and it's an incredible, like, when defeated effect.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the Raddus. Let's get into it. When you're playing against blue-based decks, you want a unit that has a lot of damage and swings hard, and it's a space unit. Most importantly, it's a space unit. People are weak in space, you want to play in space. It has a 2-for-1 effect on it. This is also good. It matches up extremely well into a lot of the big threats that the blue decks present. We're talking about Snoke, we're talking about Avenger, we're talking a little bit about Luke Skywalker. Usually, your opponent will have used his resources before you, because you are the aggressive decks and you're usually ahead. And if you're not, then maybe you did something wrong earlier in the game. So when you play this for 7, they might not have an answer for it immediately, which means that, you know, especially with the Luke, because if you get this Luke -6/-6, it's only going to shoot for 2, which is very bad. But if they can't Luke on the same turn, they won't be able to play Luke before and have one of their units be defeated before you get to swing, stuff like this. Against Snoke, again, you're playing... It's a bit dangerous against the blue villain decks. You have to be careful, because No Glory will take this unit and delete your board. But if this is on the board, it is a direct answer to Snoke. Because Snoke reduces the power by 6, so if they kill it, you can blow it by 2. So he still has 6 power, and you can blow up the Snoke.
Yeah.
If you play this into an active Avenger, the Avenger will not be able to damage to your base, because you can defeat Raddus before with the on attack trigger and kill the Avenger. So it's just a very big, beefy space unit that has a 2-for-1 attached to it, that deals with a lot of the threats that your opponent can play, that gives them tempo in the game. Like, you also Emperor Palpatine unit, they kill it, but you kill their unit. So now you're just sort of 1-for-1, then the game goes on, and we get to play more units, and they have to need more answers. and we get to do more Sabine pings, and then they die.
I think the common wisdom has been that a 7-drop needs to do something immediately when you play it. It needs to have an on play or something that affects the board state. But what I'm hearing is that you kind of do that implicitly by having that thing that needs to be answered, but will do something when it is answered. Is that am I understanding this right?
Yeah, it has the on-play effect of take the initiative, deal with it, or die.
Yeah.
It swings for 8.
Yeah, it does.
Again, weak arena, we are usually ahead, so you can just play it, and then you get the 2-for-1, and you make sure, if we're not dying, then you're dying.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, you can't argue with the results. Did you play it a lot during the tournament?
I mean, the later you get in these tournaments, the more you're facing the good decks, which are heroic decks. So those matches end on turn on 5 resources. So you side them. I sided them out a lot, but they were very good against the Qi'ras.
Yeah, for any matchup that goes past these like 7-8 resources, it's just super strong because it needs to be answered right away. I played it quite a bit against some Qi'ras, against a hand to Data Vault, and everybody was just surprised because they realized that they needed to do something about it, because even for Data Vault, it wins in 5 hits, right? And will only be 3 or 4 with everything else going on.
Yeah. No, it demands an answer.
I mean, people are afraid of taking 1 shrink from Poe, right? This does the same amount of damage as Poe. It just comes a little later.
So we were talking about siding things in and out. Let's have a look at your sideboard. So these are the 4 different cards that you have in your sideboard. And I think in our podcast episode, you talked a lot about the rightmost that card here. And that, well, I mean, I'll let you go at your own speed here. What is this and why is this?
I spoke a bit about my initial thoughts about the deck, and it combined perfectly with a wish that I've been having ever since Set 2 released. I mentioned this on the podcast as well, but that has been to play a Sabine deck where Crate Dragon was not completely nuts. I don't know, it might still be completely nuts, but I got to play it a few times and it won me some games, so it wasn't ridiculous at least. It's just, I was looking for cards, or we were looking for cards where you just keep the pressure up. It's a 10-10 for 9, so in the long matchups, it's like the Raddus, it needs an answer, but when it gets answered, you still get damage on the base. So keep up pressure, keep putting damage on, and if they cannot deal with it, it will swing for 10. If there's a sentinel, it will swing for 4, 5, 6, 7. Like, it will still hit with the overwhelm. Yeah.
What games are these for? Is it for the control matchups?
We want it because we don't have the ECL. It's a bit harder to close out the game against these hard control decks or other control decks in general. And since we're already playing the timelies, so you want a card that has insanely high impact in these matchups, and nobody can play. Like, once Crate Dragon is on the board, there's like a sub mini game, which is, can you remove Crate Dragon, or are we done playing the game? Right? It's just such a high impact card that I mean, I killed my blue-green heroic leader or opponent before they would ever been relevant to play Crate. I died or they died on 7, but against Qi'ra, the game will get you will get to 9 resources.
Yeah, unless that the blue vanilla decks just played a super laser blast, there's still a good chance that you have 1 or 2 other units on board. So even a power, which is the cheapest answer to the Crate, is not relevant.
And if they've discarded a couple of cards, and then you see them play a power or stuff like that, it's like it's the whole package adds up to create these like super annoying destructive threats that you have to deal with, or you die. because that's what these longer matchups are about in general. Just not giving them good value on their high value units, so they don't have pressure on you.
Yeah, and for Lille, it was also a bit about the surprise because they see a Sabine, so like they expect, you know, the usual, the power and the wrecker, right? So they will use their Felder Dragon, they will use their power, they will use their Rival's Fall on these kind of things. But
Certainly.
so when you put out the dragon, like they might be out of these, or they might have like resourced some of the good answers to them because they didn't expect to use them.
Yeah.
And even if they use them, right, then they spend X amount of resources, they take some damage, they most likely won't have another powerful player. It's not like they can play Felder Dragon or No Glory and Vader unit, right? Then we have to be really, really late. Then we're in the timely Great Dragon territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, you ruin their turn, they take some damage. I mean, you played a card.
Yeah.
Let's go. I activate Sabine, ping for 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bombing Run. When is this card coming on?
It was for Vader 4 yellow. It's just that in our local meta, we have a lot of people that really love playing space-only decks. So I was playing Outmaneuver in our showdown the week before, and it was pretty good. And then Steven goes, "Can you just play Bombing Run?" And then it's like, yes, I could just play Bombing Run and kill everything they own. Like if they don't have Victor Leader on the board and they're just like, you know, they're playing Sanctioner Shuttles and stuff, then you wipe out all the tokens, all the Sanctioner Shuttles, then the clone cohort shrinks to a 3/3 because all the other units are dead, and then that dies too, and then, you know, GG.
Yeah.
I would probably just not run this card in the future. I think this is like the one that I would throw out the fastest. Run something else like Traitorous maybe.
It's quite situational and specific for a specific kind of threat.
It was also because we are running 3-offs of everything, so you had to have a 1-off. So that 1-off has to be so broken in some matchup that you would never want a resources, right? So an I win button against Vader seemed, you know, is whatever.
I played against Rex droid manufacturer on day 2, and I sided it in for the second game, and I was just praying to draw it because I would have loved to play it, but unfortunately I didn't see it. But yeah, like these swarm decks, it would have been good to play.
Yeah. Then we have 2 cards that I think see a lot of sideboarding. How often and when do you bring in Cham?
Every single matchup. I brought it in all 14 matchups. Okay, so the reason why I brought in Cham in every single matchup was because I usually always remove either Raddus or the Rebel Assaults, and then you need something from your sideboard that is just good. And Cham Syndulla is absolutely busted. This card could definitely be a consideration for a main deck. He is crazy. The effect, he could be textless, and I would still think that he is pretty crazy. He just matches up so well into all the other units in the game. It is very, very hard to trade up into Cham Syndulla, and he hits swings for 5. He's also a rebel. So in the Rebel Assault matchups where you take out the Raddus, he just pushes the damage. And like everybody else is playing 3/5s or, you know, Blue Leader or something, right? He just kills people.
I think Fang Fighters aren't in of themselves very weird inclusion. I think a lot of people will have that in sideboard, and I think people also know what it's for. But there is one discussion to be had. Why Fang Fighters and not Confiscation?
Fang Fighters gives you more board presence, right? It's a unit with Confiscate. And usually when Confiscate is relevant, you can still play Fang Fighters and you don't lose out on the resources because you have so many 2-offs to fill out the curve if you need to play it on 5, for example. And even some of the big upgrades that you need to answer, if it makes your curve a bit awkward, it's fine because your opponent loses so much more compared to what you gain, right? And here I'm talking specifically about Sabine and Darksaber. If Sabine deploys and they play a Darksaber and I play my Fang Fighter, okay, I have 1 resource left, but you just lost everything. I still have a unit, and I can deploy my leader, and then I'm a hit on board.
Let's move on to some of the cards that didn't make the cut.
We had the Chewie in the very, very first draft, because he's just a strong pilot, right? In the red-green, he's one of the best ones, and especially against these removal decks, the blue control decks and so on. Put him on a ship, and he's difficult to deal with. He's a bit awkward on 5 because there's other units that are better statted than him, specifically Poe and Succus. He only hits for 5, so that's a bit of a shame. But +3/+3 on a ship is very good, but there were just other cards that were better.
It's also about us not really wanting to play space units. That in many matchups, it is extremely dangerous to play a space unit on turn 1. If you don't have the initiative, you can very often just instantly lose the game if you play a space unit on turn 1, because they will be able to have the first action, and then you know they will ECL Sabine's Masterpiece into your space unit, and you will never recover from that.
And you give yourself an early condition as well, because if you Chewie, to be sure that you can play him, you need to hit the 5 resources, because if you lose the early spaceship, then he's just a dead card, right? For a couple of rounds. Whereas the pilots that we ended up with, Frisk and Luke Skywalker, respectively, even if you don't have a space unit that you can pilot them on in the necessary matchups, you can still play them as a ground unit on turn 1, or as a double drop on turn 4, or 4 resources.
It's a big cost to pay to have Chewie in your hand. Like, you know, if they actually deal with your space unit, you are left with a card
exactly
that is a resource on the next turn, right? And you know, when you open your hand, your starting hand, you just want to see 3 2 costs and a 3 cost. You know, then we're good to go. Like, so unless you draw, like, if you're keeping that Chewie in your hand, you are setting yourself up to just get blown out of the game. And why would I need to do this when I don't have to? Like, I can just win by employing my normal strategy. Which is why I don't have Eager Escort Fighter or Open Fire in my deck. I mean, these are obviously just like the space answers. They're for the Falcons and stuff. You could play them. It might even be a good idea to play them. I lost to Han Yellow. But, you know, they don't kill the hauler, so I would have lost anyway. So it's just, I would rather focus on executing my own game plan rather than answering the opponent's game plan, because I think my game plan is just better, right? And then,
isn't that the whole point of playing a rush style deck, that you want to focus on your own game plan? That's the point of it.
But I mean, usually, a lot of people sideboard these cards in, right? Because they, like, if you're playing Sabine against or Sabine CL against the Han Green, you're the control deck because you're dead. Like, you can't raise him, right? So you have to, but we don't have to.
Yeah. Sabine's Masterpiece is one of the breakout cards of the new set for Sabine ECL, but you guys don't like it.
This card is so broken. Holy shit, it's so good.
It's a 3-off in all of the heroic ECL decks, but because they have the ECL. Without Energy Conversion Lab, it's not as great because you need to stick it on the board and make sure that it survives for a turn before you get to utilize it. You could use it with Timely Intervention, but there's better targets for that.
I mean, the resources also don't really line up, right? They already have the pilot on the unit. You're kind of dying already. Yeah.
Profundity, that was a card I was a little bit surprised to see that you were thinking about. What is appealing about this card, and under what circumstances would it have been able to make the deck?
I mean, it's just a very big space unit that, again, space unit with overwhelm, so the regular strategies to defend against these units are not available. And then you discard a lot of cards, right? So but I mean, we just decided that the Great Dragon would be more impactful. Yeah. So it's just like, but you could have played this.
It was consistent for the big slot in the sideboard. We were talking about it, if it should be a big spaceship or if it should be the Great Dragon, because this card can be very nice in these control matchups, but the damage from the dragon and the better stats and also having overwhelm just won the matchup for these two cards.
I mean, Bright Hope, again, just it's a lot better if you have more pilots in your deck. You can make it a bit bigger. I mean, I could have potentially wanted some of these decks into, like, we have a little bit of a problem against the space cunning decks because they exhaust our ground arena, and then we don't really have anything for the space arena. So something like Bright Hope or Traitorous are answers. Like Bright Hope could just say restore 10, right? If +4 on a space unit, then it, and then you get to go to the next turn and you can sort of grind them out. But yeah, it's still another card you can play to defend against these type of decks.
The problem is that they have so many ways of dealing with it in one action.
But I mean, if they're playing Cunning to exhaust your board, then they won't have already hit with, and then if you already hit with your units, then it's fine.
Yeah.
Like it's about the way they have to spend their resources than the action economy. Mm-hmm. Tile reinforcements. If people don't play Snoke, you can make a lot of units and swing in the space arena where they are weak. Yularen was another 3-cost heroic card. I think we didn't really test him that much. Swinging for 2 is not the best.
No.
So he's kind of like, he seemed like a little bit of a worse Sundari.
It's a nice idea that you make everything else a bit more beefy, so your units will survive longer and therefore provide more damage, right? But we never really got around to testing him that much.
Rex.
Captain Ray, he's good into hard control, because you make so many bodies and they only have 1-for-1 removal spells. You start swinging to the base. If you want to play him, you can play him. Mm. Okay, now we get to the big question.
Yeah, yeah. Why? You are playing Sundaris. You have Ketsu, and you've got the Fang Fighters in the sideboard. Why not? Why not put a couple of Darksabers in there?
It's a bit similar to the Chewbacca. It's depending on that you have a unit to like a proper unit to put it on. Usually it will be Sabine, but it's just so easily countered. We talked about it just before with a lot of people playing Fang Fighters either in main or inside, and I'm happy that I didn't play this card because the way that it just destroyed the game for my opponents whenever I would remove their Darksaber is just, you cannot play it, and then you will have to think, do you try to play around it? Do you gamble that you don't have it? And in that case, I would just rather play either a K to a Cham or 2/2 drops. It's not worth the risk.
It's also about how you have to. One, your hand is a bit weird. You have to keep it in your hand, right? So you have to resource something else, and then the way you have to play it out on the 4-resource turn. Usually, this means that you will have to deploy your Sabine before using your resources, which can be very dangerous in a lot of matchups, right? You are walking into takedowns. You're walking into blue leaders. There's all these traps that you can fall into by playing this card, and again. We just decided that the meta was very heavy on upgrades, which was correct, and we just didn't need the Darksaber to win the game. I mean, this Darksaber is the best way to steal a game. Deploying Darksaber on Sabine wins a lot of games, but it also loses some games.
Yeah,
and I just prefer the consistency. General Rieken, I mean, if you're playing against something sort of like a mid-rangey deck, or maybe they have to control you, then you deploy a 5/7 Sentinel, it trades in with their entire board. It's interesting. Tech, Steven had Tech in his sideboard for a while instead of the bombing run. In the late game, if you want to have an extra smuggle card, then you can start smuggling all your stuff. Pillage, if you want to lean more on the discard strategy with the Corvette and the K2 and the Poe. I personally think this might be a little bit too slow. I prefer playing the units that put the pressure on.
Yeah.
And then Traitorous. A lot of people played Traitorous this weekend. And I think you could too. The card is a very, very good answer to these piloted units because most of the pilots go on to 3-cost units. And yeah, stealing their... If the guy played a Cunning and I stole his 10-power unit, I think he would be pretty sad. It comes out a little late for you because you're not ramping, but yeah, I mean...
With the extra health, you survive for a bit longer, so it might still be worth it. We tested Sabine Deranged into Han Green for a little bit, and it was a very 50-50 matchup, depending on whether or not Han would get a pilot on an early space unit, right? If they didn't, then it was pretty favored for Sabine, but if they did, you would really need to do some proper calculations to see if you could raise them, or if you needed to do something to control it. And sometimes you just can't deal with it. So we did talk about Traitorous.
So some of the best staple cards of the Sabine deck all the way since set 1 has been this Rebel synergy, the Rebel package. And 2 of the main pillars of that has been removed from your deck. We didn't see any wing leaders, and we didn't see any fleet lieutenants.
All right, I'll take the wing leader first. The wing leader is most powerful if you're playing it on turn 2 on your 2-drop. But since in many matchups we don't want to go to the space arena because that will lose us the game instantly, then half our ground units are not, well, half of my ground units were not rebels. So you kind of take that plan away. So then you're holding the card in your hand to play it on your flip turn, which runs into the same issue as the Darksaber. You have to deploy Sabine before you use your resources, meaning you give away initiative without swinging, and you only use 3 resources when you could be using 4 resources. So you just put a lot less bodies on the board, you put a less power on the board. It's just kind of an awkward card to keep in your hand when you only have 4 cards.
I had both of these in my initial list, and they disappeared very quickly after getting schooled by Jonas and his wisdom. Some of the same logic is applicable for the Fleet Lieutenant. You need a rebel on board. We have a bit less consistency with the early rebels because of Frisk and Ketsu, and it dies to every other 3-drop nowadays, right? Because he only has 3 health. I learned that the hard way after playing a bit with Jonas, and you lose the tempo very quickly because you play Fleet Lieutenant on your 2-drop, and then they will kill Fleet Lieutenant very easily afterwards.
3-3 is bad. Yeah. Not good. 3-5, good.
So, Mace Windu.
I actually wish we would have tested Mace a bit more. We did think about it, and I think it might have a spot in the deck. But we just didn't really get around to it, I think.
It is a little awkward because there's a very limited amount of slots for 7-drops, right? They have to be very impactful, and you can't have that many of them in the deck. Mace is a little weird because he has to kill something small and then survive, right? And he doesn't really get you out of those unwinnable states that the Raddus does. Like Mace Windu, if they have Avenger or Snoke on the board or Luke Skywalker unit, Mace doesn't really do anything. So he's kind of like a bit more of a race card and a little bit less of a mid-range card. And that's why I personally didn't really want to play him that badly. And he also plays in the strong arena. Like every deck is strong in the ground arena at that point in the game.
Home 1.
Great grind cards. It's a little more expensive than the Raddus. It's a little less powerful than the Great Dragon, but bringing in a 3-cost unit is very strong. It's a consideration if you want to go a little bigger.
We talked about how on 7 you want to play something that is more of a impactful card than maybe Mace Windu. Talking about impactful cards, hard to find something more impactful than U-Wing reinforcements. How did that not make the cut?
Because Jonas convinced me that Raddus was so much better. U-Wing is good, but it deploys a lot of small threats. Raddus is way more action efficient later on in the game because with U-Wing you can actually potentially deal quite a bit of damage if you find a Fighters for Freedom and 2 red 2-drops. I did that quite a bit in the early testing, and it's super nice. But you need to be able to follow up attacking with all of these units in the next turn. Whereas something like Raddus, you can play it, and if your opponent doesn't do anything with it or to remove it, it's just 1 action to deal 8 damage to base, which is huge.
You pay 7 and you get 7 resource worth of dudes that you can play in the early stages of the game, right? It's hard for U-wing reinforcements to really trade up into your opponent's stuff. Most of the units will be in the ground arena as well, so people will have stuff there. If you've lost control, it's a lot harder. Like a big space unit that is probably going 2 for 1 is just more where I'm at. Like U-wing reinforcement doesn't give you threat density in your deck. It just draws you your early threats and puts them onto the board.
We haven't talked about Spec for Soldiers. This has been in and out of Sabine decks through the year. Why didn't it make your decks? Is it medical, or is it just something that you discovered about the card?
Jonas, I think you should tell why the poor little Spec for Soldier did not.
Okay, the Spec for Soldier was in the deck for a while. It is pretty good if you're trying to push through some of these blue heroic decks. The problem is that you have to keep it in your hand, right? It has to be one of the cards that you keep in your hand, and it's a 2/2. It will get eaten by every single other unit in the game, and the whole reason for the deck's existence is that you're playing beefy, hard to kill units so that you can either trade up or kill them by hitting their base because they can't deal with all your units. So yeah, I mean, he's pretty good against the blue heroic, but yeah, he didn't make the cut.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the mechanical parts of how you play the deck and what you're trying to do. Let's start out with which arenas do you need to play towards?
All right. It kind of depends a lot on whether you're kind of facing a villain deck or if you're facing a heroic deck. The heroic decks are usually a lot stronger in the space arena. You're going to be facing Sabine ECLs and Han ones, and it can be very dangerous to play space units in these matchups because they will play Falcon or they will ECL Masterpiece, and then the game will be over. So that's why I will mulligan in these matchups for a ground unit with 3 power to not lose the game instantly if I don't have initiative. But against the villainy decks, they are usually very weak in the space arena. They play fewer units in general, and they just most of their units are on the ground.
When you look at this deck, you would think that it's playing more mid-range and that it would want to control a lot in the beginning, especially against something like a aggro deck. But I think the way you describe the deck, you're not trading when I think you're supposed to be trading, and that is confusing to me. Could you talk a little bit on that?
I can actually expand a bit on that, right? Because it's kind of reverse. I like to trade against control decks early, and I like to race against aggro decks early. The control decks are usually playing a lot of these like weird tech units, General Yularen or Dr. Pershing, and they don't get much value if you're trading into them. And then they still have to use cards to remove your units later on in the game, and then you can pivot against those type of decks. But the aggro decks that are playing 25 HP bases are playing the same units as you, and they don't really have late game at all. Like, you're probably bigger than them, but since they can't race you, then they have to do all these inefficient trades into your units, so you can just race them and force them into a lockout. There are a million traps you can walk into in this format that will basically lose you the game instantly.
What points of friction is there to this deck? When do you need to really be sharp? What could lose you the game?
Do you want to start soon?
I think the we've touched upon it a bit already, and the biggest one is definitely Sabine's Masterpiece. Sabine UCL was the most popular deck for Lille. Everybody's running 3 copies. You need to be very aware of the power that it can provide. And what you want to pay attention to is what unit do they play on turn 1. As Jonas said, if you can, you really want to dodge the space arena early. If you're forced to it, at least know what you're up against. Sabine's Masterpiece on attack, if you have a green unit, you can give an experience token, which means it can give it to itself on attack, and it will attack for 4. It will kill anything on turn 2 and 3. for 2 or 3 resources, right? Except for the hauler. If they have a red unit instead, you're a bit more safe because then they can ping for damage, but the masterpiece might not survive. So at least you might be able to trade with it if you have something like a Phoenix Squadron A-Wing. But other than that, you really want to look out for it and just go heavy on the ground early on.
Yeah, I mean it's the same with your ground unit with the initiative, right? You know, if you need a plan for what do you do when they ECL. Right? This is like, you know, have your red 5 ready, stuff like this. Against Qi'ra, you really need a good plan for their flip turn, right? You have to spend your resources and attack with your units in a sequence that will not get you blown out by overwhelming barrage or get a devastating gunship into overwhelming barrage later. So there's a lot of maneuvering on like these on your opponent's strongest turns, where maybe you need to sit with a unit and I rebel assaulted one unit into a Qi'ra to remove her from the board, which kind of ruined my opponent's turn. If your opponent is passing into 4 resources, it happened a couple of times. You know, just don't deploy your leader, take the initiative, use your resources before you deploy your leader in almost all scenarios.
Use the fact that your opponent still has resources left.
Yeah, that's a good way to pressure them, I suppose.
I did walk into a trap as well. I played against the Han 2 ECL, and they can blue leader you on the same resources, but because we both have a lot of units, nobody was saying pass, right? So I just flipped, had my Sabine killed instantly. Not a good trade for me at all. Like, yeah. It is a lot about the early turns, who has the initiative. Like even just, you know, you're playing a Sabine mirror, even if you're playing Sabine Data Vault mirror, right? Like we rolled the dice at the start of the game, and I look at my hand. I'm like, oh, I have a Sabine unit. That sounds great. But I lost the initiative, so now I have to mulligan, right? Because if my opponent plays Battlefield Marine and my only 2-cost play is a Sabine Ren unit, I'm very, very, very far behind, right?
So what would you say are the worst matchups for you?
The game that Jonas didn't play.
It might be something like some cunning decks. We probably haven't had enough. There are so many different decks. Like people are playing maybe 10, 12 different decks, right? We just have not tested into all of them. Yeah. So
personally, for me, I struggle a bit into Qi'ra. I faced 2, and those were the 2 only games that I lost on day 1. I lost both of them 1-2, so it was very close games, but I could have definitely played it a bit smarter had I had some more practice into it. I do think it's one of the more difficult matchups, especially because, as Jonas touched on, you need to be wary of the flip turn because they can just destroy everything with a flip and an OB, especially if they ramped, so they might be 1 resource ahead of you.
What would you say are your freebies? What are the best matchups for you?
We started the first time that Sabine Data Vault entered the board was against Quinlan Tarkentown. And it was very, very difficult for Quinlan to keep up, and Sabine won 2-0. We didn't really test it at all after that, actually, so there was a whole month until the tournament. It was my first round of day 1, and it was the same experience. And Jonas didn't even play it until the top 4 against Adam, which, although the matchup might be good, of course, Adam is a very good player, so also had to be respected, but it went fairly fine.
Yeah, as you can see on stream.
I mean, it's also you're playing Sabine, right? So if you know what you're doing, all these like blue, yellow control decks or Palpatines and stuff like people that don't ever have any intention of killing you, if you know how to play these matchups, they are very, very, very simple to execute, right?
Yeah, and in general, like the good matchups will be whatever base has less health than you, and especially these ECL decks and Tarkentown, because you can just put the pressure on them and force the game to progress, right? If they don't do anything, you can just always ping and put 1 damage on, and they will die before you.
A lot of the hype around the deck is obviously the surprise that people got. Would you say that that was an important factor in why you did as well as you did, both of you, or is it just super strong deck even if people knows about it?
Like a bit of both. The surprise is always strong. It's difficult to play against something you don't know. Like if you don't know what cards are in the deck, right? People were pretty spot on that. Of course, they expected some of it to be the same, but also like something must be different. I mean, after all, there's at least 10 more cards in the deck from the standard Sabine list. But I mean, we did quite a bit of testing also with the friends that we traveled with and so on. And even after them learning the list and knowing what to really expect, it was performing all right. I do think that it's a super strong deck.
Would you bring it even now to a big tournament?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I honestly, I was actually surprised at how well I thought my opponents played against Sabine Data Vault, right? Because it's like, I'm facing my first Sabine ECL opponent. There's no way he has ever played against this deck, and he just ECLs my 2-drop on turn 3, right? Which is kind of what you sort of have to do, right? Because you need to get the tempo back somehow. Like, so I don't know. People. I don't feel like I got that many free wins by playing Data Vault, but I mean, I would still do it. I think the extra health gives me a lot of opportunity to play more turns, express my game plan. Yeah. Like just it gives me more time to just develop the 2 into 3 into 2 2s with the flip, and then sort of just kill people from there.
One of the most important factors when people argue for playing a regular Sabine deck is that it gives you sort of a break between rounds because it plays quick. You get shorter games, so you get less mentally exhausted. Well, you get to rest a little bit, and then you can, in the long run, get slightly less mentally exhausted. How easy is this deck to play once you learn the lines, and how quick does it play?
It has the same speed as regular Sabine, right? Your kill turn is the same as regular Sabine. Like the most powerful ECL targets are Poe and Wrecker, and the game ends on 5 resources anyway, right? Most of the time when it takes longer, it's because your opponent is starting to trade into you to force the game to get to the point where they can get more value out of those cards, right? Unless they use their energy conversion lab on turn 2. So I mean, Steven had a lot of rounds where he had 40 minutes. Like I'm like trying to find his table, and he was done 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, if it's similar to regular Sabine, it's very fast matchups. Of course, you can go the longer distance against some of the more control-y decks. I think the game I had that took the longest was against the Han 2 Data Vault, where we had like 5 or 10 minutes left. Everything else was at least 20 minutes left on the clock, no matter whether it was Qi'ra or it was Sabine Miro or Quinlan or whatever. Yeah, it is a fast deck, and you pressure all the time. Yeah,
my longest decks were probably against the Qi'ra. I played 3 games against the Luke Data Vault, and we had 20 minutes left after the 3 games. It's just,
It's still very quick deck.
I mean, when you have 12 or 15 power in play by the end of the 3rd turn, then someone is gonna die.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently did this State of Sabine video for the channel. Between the two of these 2 videos, you will get a very complete idea about Sabine. And one thing that is brought up, whether you're playing yellow Sabine or green Sabine, it's that the whole play strategy is already determined when you do your resourcing. You do almost all of the work there, and that is the most crucial point when you play it. Is this true for this deck?
I mean, I would say so. It is where I use the vast majority of my time, because it is in the resourcing decision that I have to decide what I want to play on my turn, and what I want to play depends on what my opponent could potentially play, right? I want to play the most annoying unit that makes them waste the most amount of resources and time to kill it, so I can swing my units into their base and get either good trades or damage, right? So yeah, 100% agree. I don't think this deck is easier to play than Sabine ECL. You do not get as many free lunches playing without ECL and Darksaber as you do if you have them in your deck. So, I mean, if you are up for the challenge and learning how to play the deck, then it will perform. But because so much of the deck hinders on the whole, that what we were just talking about, like resourcing and knowing what your opponent's cards do, so you know what you need to mulligan for, what you need to resource, and what you need to play. Right? There are not. There's no waylays. There's no cheat codes in this deck. Right? The deck is very, very, very honest. So yeah, you have to put in the work if you want to see the results.
Right. I think that's a very good point to end this video on. And I need to just thank you so much for agreeing to do this video with me. For myself personally, I was so eager to learn about this deck, and I think a lot of people out there are going to be real happy to hear you talk on this deck. Thanks for your time, and thanks for explaining everything so well for us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. And hashtag shout out Francesco, game night on Card Market. Check him out, guys. If you want to buy the cards where I buy my cards. Hashtag ad.